Good morning, and welcome to today's Moss Adams webcast, Business Value of Generative AI. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Moss Adams webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters for Moss Adams, Loren Denherter, Managing Director, and Casey Fike, Senior Manager. And with that, I will pass it over to Casey to get us started.
Great, thanks. And thanks everybody for attending today. I think very excited to present on just what we're seeing from a value perspective related to generative artificial intelligence. Kind of stepping through today, what we want to do is right off the bat, let's get into what we're seeing in the field, helping our clients with some example solutions, and then talk through, like when we say AI, very broad topic. I'm sure you've all heard a lot about it in your business, in the news, whatever that may be, but to really give some context of when we say AI, what are we exactly talking about, how to use generative AI, and then how to get started. And one other thing, just for everybody listening, if you do have questions, please use that Q&A function. We might not be able to get to them today, but we can definitely follow up. Again, very new technology, new topic. More than happy to talk about it. So step through a couple of examples here. So these use cases, and we'll get into more detail in the next couple of slides, but immediately when I think generative AI use cases, my mind goes to unstructured data. And when I say unstructured data, what I mean by that is think about text, Word documents, emails, notes, policies, procedures, regulations. Wherever there's a heavy amount of this unstructured data, that's where we're seeing a lot of efficiency and effectiveness and augmentation, better equipping your workforce to use generative AI, Just a couple of use cases, and I'll get into more details I mentioned on the next couple of slides, but ones that I want to call out, this policy accessibility, right? So things that I think about here, policies, often a lot of text, a lot of pages. It's difficult to decipher, but using generative AI to bring insight, if your employees or you might have specific questions around policies, is a great way to kind of start off. Another one I want to call out, internal operating knowledge. We're seeing a lot of success here, a really good first use case around generative AI. Again, probably have a lot of procedure documentation. Your employees probably have a lot of institutional knowledge in their mind on how they do their day-to-day tasks within your organization. Getting that into a generative AI solution, we're seeing a lot of efficiency, bringing more, augmenting your workforce, allowing them to self-serve and answer their own questions through the use of a Gen AI solution is, again, another really strong, effective first step in what we're seeing. This first example I want to talk through is around a survey assessment. I'm sure all of us on this call have gone through a survey online fill out questions. Those questions are kind of bucketized, if you will, on a quantitative view. It's on a scale of 1 to 10, please respond. But then for this particular use case that we assisted a client with, there was a lot of responses that were text-based. And when I say a lot of responses, well over 1,000 of survey responses. How do you look at all of that effectively and really understand what each individual response was trying to get at? If you were to put a staff member or a handful of your team on reading through that, that's going to take hours and hours, weeks. You're going to lose context. What we were able to do here is take those text responses, put them into a generative AI solution, and then able to query against that, ask questions, provide context, really get a good response in a matter of hours rather than the matter of weeks to really understand what these responses to these questions were. And if I continue on to this next, again, to this next example that was kind of paired with this first one was, what this came down to was a significant rewrite of a number of job descriptions. We had all this feedback from the initial survey, but the challenge then, similar to what I was talking about earlier, was how do we go through all of this? How do we manage all of this text? It's way too heavy to put a team on and get responses. What we were able to do is, again, take this and rewrite these job descriptions through a generative AI solution to provide that feedback. And when I say feedback, it's not only the updated job description, but we're able to allow reasoning to be put into this to understand why was this updated, right? So the context. So it's not necessarily, it wasn't in a black box, right? We were able to work with the solution, develop the solution to provide the reasoning of why this job description changed. And again, this is something that we were able to do in a matter of hours, which would take a team weeks, months, at a significant time and cost and probably diminishing returns to provide feedback. This next example is around compliance. Compliance, by and large, very language, very text intensive. It's a whole bunch of words kind of describing of what should be occurring, what we need to be doing, internal operating procedures on what we need to do. How do we kind of marry those two together? If we go to just any sort of end user that you work within your organization, there's a lot of, you might get one particular answer. There might be a bit of unclarity there. It's a heavy lift to kind of go through all of your operating procedures. How do they marry? Where are we not allowing or where are we not following a particular piece of compliance? Again, I get back to just, if we were to have these two kind of sets be reconciled, this is something that could take weeks, right? Where we're missing something, we're out of compliance. We might know from our standard operating procedures. Again, what we're able to do here is take whatever that relevant compliance that needs to be followed. How does that reconcile? Get that into a generative AI solution, and then reconcile our procedure documents against that, and then provide that reasoning to understand if we have a particular procedure that we're not following, why is that? What's that update in our procedure need to be? Provide that reasoning. Internal operating knowledge. I was talking about this earlier. If I'm listening on this call, again, this is really kind of where we're seeing a lot of traction in using generative AI internally. Again, back to policies, procedures. How do I do this task? What is the process to onboard a new vendor? All that's either buried in procedure documents that could be scattered throughout your organization on your internal SharePoint side, if you will, or it could all just be internal knowledge, something that I've been doing for years. Again, working with a lot of clients that may have a workforce that's exiting, that again, all that institutional knowledge is up, it's been learned from our day-to-days throughout however long we've been within an organization. What we're doing here is, again, getting that clients their own internal generative AI solution, and then having their end users be able to create a chat. Again, how do I do this? How do I do that? What is the process? Again, taking all that knowledge that's been learned, taking your existing documentation, getting it in one easy to query, easy to ask, easy to start a chat with solution that, again, really augments, brings efficiency to your workforce. This last one, reviewing complex transactions, what we're doing here is kind of contract review. Again, contracts, like I said earlier, very heavy from a text perspective, maybe a bit ambiguous for somebody that's kind of reading them for the first time. But again, what we're doing here is taking contracts that organizations need to be following, if signed with vendors, customers, whoever that may be, and then ingesting that into an internal generative AI solution where they can then, your end user can then go out, write, start chats, ask questions. Am I following this the right way? What is the process to pay this vendor? What do I need to be following? So again, I think these use cases, as I kind of let off with, my mind immediately goes, where's a good starting spot for generative AI in an organization? Wherever our employees, wherever we all are running into heavy text, knowledge that's been learned that kind of, again, exists in people's minds. That's kind of where we're seeing these good starting points. And with that said, I will pass it to Loren.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. So what I wanted to do here is just provide, excuse me, further context around generative AI and how it leads or how it provides work augmentation. And it's really a key word here. So not that you have AI that is just running in the black box, as Casey was mentioning, but it is something that is working alongside your people. So kind of looking at that broader category of, AI is such a huge subject out here. I'd like to just give you a little bit of framework and how to think about this. So there is a shift that's going on in the workforce right now. It'll be probably thought of as a generational thing where the younger generation coming into the workforce is AI fluent, and they are coming in and doing things in a vastly more efficient way than the current workforce. And so it really is putting pressure on making sure everybody becomes have some AI fluency, that they become AI fluent. And when you just take a step back and look at your people and your business, pretty much all of your competitive advantage and how you face the market and your institutional knowledge is in the minds of your people. And we don't want to have those current people in some disadvantage through efficiency because of the new workforce coming in using these tools. You want them to really be on the same footing. So to that end, when we hear about all of these things, AI, it's such a big subject, can get confusing. So what I'm going to do here is just provide you three really broad categories now to think about this, and some framework and scaffolding on how to take these different subjects you're hearing and categorize them. So the first one is around vendor software. So think of all of your enterprise solutions, ERP, all of your HCM solutions around HR, CRM, you name it. All of these software vendors today are feeling the pressure to have some kind of AI component in their software, and they're pitching that to you. And so all of those pretty much are transactional in nature. Have the invoices go through and be posted automatically, have people onboarded, that whole onboarding piece, AI enabled, et cetera. So they have their place where they make these tasks way more efficient, and that's important. Now you have to look at that individually and say, does that fit in my business, what it's doing? If so, here's what you're going to find is that the AI is a very efficient participant in the process that is 100% not accountable. So this is where augmentation comes into this, where it's when you bring AI into the picture, it is going to change your business process, and you have to have people alongside. A person needs to be accountable for what's happening there. So that's kind of one category, is you will have software vendors, all of them in the software you use are going to have AI functionality, and you should consider using it to take the drudgery out of the work and all these things, get the efficiency. Just know there's more than just turning it on. You have to change the business process. Second category of AI is these tools that are out there. So think of them as apps, if you will. There are things like meeting summarizers. So like Fireflies and Otter, those kind of apps where they're very specific. They do a fantastic job of listening to a meeting, getting all the content, summarizing, getting notes sent out to everybody, and the rest of it. There's also things like, internet research. So like Perplexity and Copilot and Google's Gemini. So all of those things are helping to just make all of that research work go way faster. And it's not just faster, it has a way of taking and just broadening the subject really quickly. So then your research is much more robust in what it gets done. And there is a growing list of those kind of apps that are out there. The third category is really what we're describing here, is to say there are the power in this AI capability where it kind of needs to be plugged into, so to your custom process. So there's something unique about your business. There's unique about your policies, your operating procedures, and or how your contracts are set up. And so you need to be able to take and tie together, really integrate right into your system AI capabilities that are then augmenting what your people are doing. And so that's the examples that we went through up above. So for example, if you're taking your policies and putting them into an AI solution so you can chat with it, here's the net effect of what's happening there is your policies and procedures and your contracts, et cetera, they all live off on some shared folder or SharePoint site, et cetera. And so it's kind of a heavy lift for the frontline people that are dealing with this every day to go look up something that's out there. And so because of that, there's some resistance to go do that. And they'll probably just work off of the top of their head into institutional knowledge unless they need to look it up. What AI does is it takes all of that knowledge and just moves it to the front line. It's chattable. Just ask an unstructured question and it'll go out there and find this content and bring it back. Is it compliant with contract? Is this how the policy should go? How are we supposed to be able to do this specialized task? Or how do we go through this onboarding process? So that's what we're talking about here is able to do. Now, we stay on top of the market. And so we can help you go through and just understand for the things you're hearing, the business you're in, where does AI fit in this picture and how do you build AI fluency with your people? So it's, again, very broad subject, but this is what augmentation is all about. It's about AI is not just running free by itself and you don't know what's going on. It's having to participate in that process. Just one more note before I move on here. Here at Moss Adams, what we have internally is what we call Moss GPT, so that we have a safe way that's not a public site that we can go through and work with AI directly. And with the micro efficiencies we have gained for having all of our people have access to something to work safe is, it's kind of immeasurable. It's like when we first stepped into this and made that available, we had no idea how much value our people would get back from that by just building internal fluency and providing a tool for them to work with. So just moving on here. So everything we've covered so far about using and integrating AI and generative AI into your business process, there are these 5 things that you can generally think about that this AI is very good at. So one, generating content. Just not only does it generate content, but when you put something in there and ask it a question that's kind of focused, it'll respond back fast on that focused thing. It'll also expand the subject for you to say, here's the other things you should be considering as well. Then there's a summarization side of this, where putting in a lot of content, we wanted to just be able to ask it questions and summarize and boil down this huge amount of text that we are faced with. And then there's the interpreting and evaluating what Casey was talking about when you have a lot of input from different sources, different people. How can it go through and evaluate and give you an assessment of what's going on there? Knowledge search we've covered here, about having a knowledge base, and then translation if you're in a multilingual environment. So just to take a even more focused approach on this, to say, so if you're just to approach this policy assessment and enhancement, so if you're in like a regulated environment per se, and you have to have policies that align with regulation or just as how you operate, AI can help with that. You can take that standard and say, go and do an assessment against what you have, and it will come back and say, and you can just like log that away, and then it'll make a recommendation and say, here's what's there and what needs to change, or if it's okay, and here's what's missing. Harder question, and it can do that. Log with that result, and then make that available so that a person, when they assess this augmentation side, so all that work is done. Now you need a person in there that's accountable, that'll say, look at those results and say, okay, here's the thing that we're going to keep, here's what we're going to add, here's some editing that needs to happen. The end result of all of that is you're going to have way more robust policies from this process. So the question is then, if they're more robust, did we just make it harder for the front line to actually read these documents because there's more content there? The answer is yes, but there is AI. If you AI enabled that, we didn't just made it dramatically easier and more accurate for that frontline user to be able to go in and just chat with it. Here's my situation. What do I need to do in this? What's the policy and operating around this? So I just wanted to provide that example of here's what it looks like when you have augmentation that is person and machine working side by side. So then the question is, how do you get started with this? And it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. We highly recommend that you use really an incremental process. And I will kind of step back to what we've done here at Moss Adams is instead of going in and taking a really heavy approach to this and saying, here's a large use case and it looks like this particular one is going to have, an ROI in this period of time. Instead, we said, this technology is moving so fast that we, as a leadership team, as a small leadership team, we're not going to be able to come up with all the use cases that could help all 4,500 of our people. And so instead, why don't we just put a safe application out there that everybody can use and see what they come up with? So effectively what it did is it took that small investment in making that available and then said, everybody become AI fluent and see what you can do with it. And the results from that have been nothing short of amazing and continue to grow. We find new stuff that we can do all the time. And by the way, a way to work with that is through champions. So that kind of gets to our first part of this here is number one, kind of just make the commitment that you're going to move forward and build that fluency. And then not everybody comes along in the same time. So some people will be a little more reluctant or they're just busy. And then others will say, no, I'm really excited about this. I'm going to bring it in. Have those champions kind of sprinkled throughout your organization. And then they can help other people around them say, hey, look what I've been able to do in a job that's similar to yours. And it helps in this way. That fluency grows and augments your people so that you get the net effect of those efficiencies. With the champion in place, just looking for that initial use case to get it kicked off. And, as a call up there, it may be as simple as this, internal chat like we did here at Moss Adams. It's a great place to start. But, all those other things that Casey was talking about early on, those are also good incremental places to start as well, something that can align with your business. And then choose a platform, engage your workforce. We can kind of help you through this, but the last thing there, just to continuously improve, is really important. Take this in an incremental way. So we stay on top of the market. The market is moving fast. There is a ton going on out there and new things happening all the time. And so I personally have to read every day to stay up on top of what's happening. And I'm every week surprised about something that's happening. But it is moving that fast, and it is finding its way into the workforce. When I talk with higher ed institutions, they are, so just a year ago, they were all saying, it's cheating, we have to block against it. And in the space of 8 to 9 months, they did a 180-degree turn. It said, no, we're training the workforce of the future, and we have to embrace this and help people understand that this is where they're going to be competing in the workforce going forward. That's how fast it's moving. And so we're staying on top of it to kind of help you understand can it work for your business. So with that, Casey, if you want to go through.
Appreciate it, Loren. Thanks. A couple things we want to call out here. Low cost way to get started. Right? I don't think, and we're kind of advising against this, making significant dollar and time investments to get these projects off the ground. There's an effective way we can help you get started, right? And I think if I tie that into, Loren, what you were talking about, that last bullet, future workforce, we need to make your organizations need to be AI fluent to an extent. Like, this technology is not going away. This is not a flash in the pan. This is what, Loren, to your point on the higher ed, I remember that conversation, and this is where businesses can use generative AI as an effective internal tool to bring more efficiency and augment their workforce. And again, that second bullet, sorry to be skipping around, but just taking all that institutional knowledge, all that internal documentation, this can really make all of that accessible. And again, I get back to just augmenting your workforce, right? AI is not coming for your job, but it's a way, right? It's a great, it's a large leap forward in technology that can bring a ton of efficiency to your organization. So with that said, thank you everybody for attending, and Talia, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome, thanks Casey. Thank you both for a great presentation today. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we will do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Here's a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. Please also visit mossadams.com for future webcasts and other resources to help elevate our performance upward. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time.